So this is the question. Would you take this on a flat, crushed gravel canal path race? Question came from my first look video covering the Adidas Terrex Agravic Speed Ultra 2. Still a mouthful. I did respond in the affirmative that the Speed Ultra 2 would be a good pick if you were looking for a super shoe in the trail department. But a couple other, or maybe more than a couple other options came to mind. Of course, another and perhaps the top option as far as the trail side is the Hoka Rocket X Trail. This is going to be more of a hiking review. No A/B testing on the run today. Check out my last video titled Why Race. Talk about an injury situation that I'm dealing with as you're watching this. I'm exactly 2 weeks in, 2 weeks to go until I can start up my return to running program. So we are off on a hike today instead of a full bore test run here, but I did get some test miles into the Rocket X Trail, actually a few more than the Speed Ultra 2, even though I had the Adidas shoe a little bit earlier. The Rocket X Trail just worked into my training a little bit better as I was ramping up to the Backyard Ultra. And I also threw in a, what was at the time, kind of training race, 6 hours on a looped course, very fast. And Rocket X Trail was a shoe that I was looking at towards that race, and potentially a Backyard Ultra, probably not, because it's too fast of a shoe for that. So I do have a good amount of miles in the Rocket X Trail and some test clips actually, so we'll share those throughout the course of this video. Again, I was thinking of this shoe more for those races, so put more miles in it, but I am familiar with the Speed Ultra 2, certainly for the fact that I ran in Speed Ultra 1, so I honed in my initial video of the Adidas shoe on the updates from version 1 to version 2. I raced the 50 miler at Scout Mountain in version 1. Very familiar with that shoe and a lot of carryover to version 2. Certainly some differences that I cover in that video. Check that one out. Quick spec comparison here. Adidas Speed Ultra 2 coming in at 10.1 ounces, 286 grams. I measure 38 millimeters at the heel, so 38.30, 8 mil drop for the full stack. Speed Ultra 2 Light Strike Pro foam underfoot. That's a TPE based foam with polyamide, quite stiff energy rods spanning the length of the foot and forking into those rod type structures, more so towards the front. Rocket X Trail here goes perhaps next gen with the midsole. Full A-TPU foam with an H-shaped carbon fiber plate embedded. With that next gen foam, you do get a lighter weight, 9.3 ounces, 265 grams. I've got these measured at 41 under the heel. 6 mil drop gives 41.35 full stack. Coming back to the initial question, I did suggest that you may look to go for a road super shoe, and you might have noticed a couple of those back in the van. Few options for running fast when traction is not a concern, terrain is not really a concern. Obviously, your mileage will vary on how far you can take road shoes out on the trails or canal paths or flat dirt. One thing I did mention, that grip is for me a concern when running road shoes on dirt. We've got a lot of sandy terrain around here, and even though you could definitely get by with a road shoe, sometimes you can get a little bit of slippage when it's sandy or loose, and sometimes even a lot of these gravel shoes are useful in that regard for training purposes. But as far as racing, definitely want to go with a racing style of super shoe. That's what this commenter was asking about. I think the Adidas Speed Ultra 2 has the edge here. They did beef up the lugs from V1 to V2. You've got a mix of 3 and 4 mil lugs there. Rocket X Trail has 3 mil lugs, wider space. There's more gaps underneath the rubber coverage with the Rocket X Trail, more exposed A-TPU foam underfoot. So if you were in a scenario, I'm not sure how canal-esque or say smooth cinder, smooth dirt, the terrain or race course this commenter was asking about, but you would want to go with a trail shoe if grip and traction was a concern. That'd be a scenario to pick trail style super shoe over a road super shoe. Of course, if there's no issues at all, you can certainly shave at least an ounce, typically speaking, usually more when it comes to road super shoes. But got this Rocket X Trail underfoot here. You're not giving up too much weight if you want to get past that, say, smooth dirt, very easy runnable terrain, a little bit more range here at not that much more weight. So as far as the outsoles are concerned, I would give that grip and traction edge to the Speed Ultra 2, although, you know, it is not a shoe designed for pure technical terrain. If you're looking at the rubber itself, Continental rubber durability is definitely going to be high. Lugs are a touch deeper compared to the Rocket X Trail. With the Rocket X Trail, you do not have Vibram Mega Grip. It's an in-house compound from Hoka, and it does feel a little bit soft to the touch. I think I've heard some durability concerns with the actual rubber of the Rocket X Trail that are not really the case, or I've never really heard any issues with the Continental rubber on any of the Adidas models. The Adidas clearly has that signature super narrow platform, very pinched in the middle of the shoe and also very narrow under the heel. Rocket X Trail, as is typical of Hoka, wider platform on the ground that you see in a lot of their distance-oriented trail models, even some of their road models. Just a huge wide base. I wouldn't say excessively huge. When I heard about the shoe, I was expecting something like totally crazy, but I don't think that's the case. It's kind of standard, perhaps a little wide, but of course, in relation to the Speed Ultra 2, just massive, massive platform on the ground under the foot, notably different, notably wider under the middle of the shoe and the heel, but forefoot kind of close, even a little bit more still in the Rocket X Trail. I always thought the Adidas Speed Ultra model had an excessively wide forefoot due to its geometry and kind of setup, how they want you to be running, but Rocket X Trail even trumps it in that area as well. Platforms are set up in alignment, I believe, with the running geometries of both of these shoes. The Adidas clearly oriented towards forefoot running, faster runners, lighter runners probably. You really need to be, or at least be very close to landing up on the forefoot. It doesn't lend itself well, or at least not efficiently, the Speed Ultra 2 that is, to heel striking. There's just a huge kind of tail rocker in the mix there. Also the narrowness under the middle of the shoe I've talked about with the platform. Not as stable if you're expressly landing, say, in the rear third to 2/3 of the shoe. Rocket X Trail, on the other hand, you've got Hoka's Meta Rocker, wide platform again under the middle of the shoe and the heel. It is very variable, quite variable in terms of your ground striking pattern. You could clearly be a heel striker and work very well with this shoe, certainly landing more towards the middle of the foot, and even the forefoot is also going to work just fine in the shoe. Definitely more flexible in terms of where your personal foot hits the ground in your typical ground strike. So distance and duration will certainly come into play if you're choosing one or the other of these models. If you know that, say, you're a forefoot striker, more of an efficient runner, not that you can't be an efficient runner and run in the Rocket X Trail, there's just more variability underfoot there. With the Adidas Speed Ultra, you have to be ready and aware that if it is a long distance and duration that you're covering in a run or an event, you have to think about, are you really going to be up on your forefoot? Are you really going to be having something more of a forward-leaning, efficient foot strike pattern as the miles and hours wear on? Are you planning to slow down or expecting to slow down a bit? Maybe get a little bit more ground contact time, sit a little further back as you're running, and then stability and kind of the efficiency of the Speed Ultra 2 is going to be more blunted in that scenario, whereas I feel like the Rocket X Trail can really kind of keep that roll going. You're going to feel that level of stability, propulsion from the plate, even as you tire. I mentioned earlier having a test race on the calendar. I ran 48.94 miles in a local looped race over here, flat loop, but it wasn't on smooth dirt exactly. There were sections of road, sections of smooth dirt, but there's also a lot of it that is more like a horse path. So it's kind of like cobbly rock, rounded, kind of bumpy stuff underfoot, which if you're going out for, say, an hour run, totally fine. You wouldn't even think twice about it. You probably wouldn't even call it a trail. But once you start getting out there into some of the longer distance events they have out there, I've done 24 hours before. They have a 48, 100 miler, 12 hour. I did the 6 hour this time for the training. And even then, once you get to the, say, 4, 5, 6 hours of that event, you start to feel the kind of wobbliness of the trail underfoot. The instability tends to kind of creep up on your ankles as you go. So that was one reason why I was really looking at the Rocket X Trail more for that type of race. And I didn't even really give a thought to the Speed Ultra 2. I just knew as I got down to the end of that, I've done it again. Did 24 hours a few years ago. I attempted 48 once, didn't get too far, but I just know how it works the ankles, and with the thinner platform underfoot of the Speed Ultra 2, I just knew that wouldn't be a good match for that type of event. So you really have to think about the terrain underfoot. The commenter again was talking about cinder canal path. So if it is generally smooth, and again, as I mentioned just before this, if you know that you're going to be able to keep up that efficiency for however long you're going to be out there, Speed Ultra 2 can certainly be a good pick. But I actually did not end up running in the Rocket X Trail. I ran in a prototype shoe from Decker's, parent lab of Hoka, which can't talk about that shoe, but I will say that it is a similar setup to this model in that it had A-TPU foam, carbon fiber plate, more of a shorter distance racer, if you will, for 6 hours. But it's similar kind of geometry to this with the rocker setup. Just a faster shoe a little bit than this one, more for shorter races, and it worked really well. So this would definitely be a good option if you're out there. If I was thinking, say, who knows, maybe next year, head out there for 12 hours, I would definitely probably lean towards the Rocket X Trail for that type of event. Again, it's not a straightforward flat dirt race. It's not a elevation type race either. You're not going up and down, but the cobbly nature of some of the sections just really works your feet, and I find that a wider platform can really just feel stable. And again, fatigue is going to get to you. It's gotten to me over every long race I've done out there, and just having that big flat base to land on, just not thinking about any extra wobble from a narrow platform, gives you that extra stability. And yeah, if I do 12 hours one of these years, well, who knows what'll be around by then, but having the shoes that I have now, I would definitely go for the Rocket X Trail again, because that's double the time I'm out there versus that prototype shoe I wore. And I was feeling it by the end of 6 hours, even though that is kind of a still higher stack shoe that I ran in. There's definitely more cush here, more protection, and again, more stability with the wider base here. A little talk about the foams here, leading into more of a kind of mini review of the Rocket X Trail. the Speed Ultra 2 TPE foam again. Doesn't feel as poppy as, say, the Rocket X Trail. They definitely upped the softness since version 1, so it is a more comfortable shoe underfoot. But Rocket X Trail, A-TPU foam, talked about that in the new Kiprun models. The Max model definitely feels kind of soft and reactive in a way that this Rocket X Trail does. Same thing with the Kip Summit Race model. Definite pop, definite bounce in that shoe. A-TPU foam. They feel a little bit different underfoot compared to this Hoka shoe. I think there's a little more softness in the Hoka shoe, say, compared to the Race model. Max definitely feels softer because there's no carbon fiber plate in the mix. So it's really hard to tell the foam itself or differentiate between the foams themselves, with one shoe having a carbon fiber plate and the other shoe not. Comparing, say, the Race and the Rocket X Trail, both with carbon fiber plates, I think a little bit more softness with the Hoka shoe here, a little touch more sink in, but both very reactive. Maybe a little quicker pop off the ground with the Race, but it is, I believe, a narrower platform. So that's gonna not spread out the impact as much as the Rocket X Trail does. Really absorbs a lot of impact, spreads it out over that wide platform on the ground. This will be my little turnaround for the day. Short little hike here, maybe, let's see, hour 15-ish. I know everyone always wants to know about arch contour, a little bit more prominent in the Speed Ultra 2, but not that much. They're both fairly neutral underfoot, smooth contour. I don't notice any specific kind of points. Good support though, not flat feeling either. Just really nothing really to worry about in terms of arch contour with both of these models here. Quick stop to look at upper fit here. I've got both of these in a US 10, EU 44. I think I've got enough space here. I find that there's a little bit more taper to this Hoka model. It has more of a road marathon type of upper here. Definitely not underfoot with that wide base, but you can see all of these kind of lighter shades of green. They have an extensive web of underlays built into the shoe, but the upper material itself is very lightweight. They wanted to keep the weight down here as much as possible. Again, 9.3 ounces at this stack, at this width on the ground is pretty incredible. Highly breathable. All these zones are fully breathable. Not an issue with this model, but I want to have that web in there to kind of keep the foot held in. If you look up front, I find a little bit more taper towards the front of the toes. It's not as wide and spacious of a fit as a lot of Hoka's other trail models. Again, with a 10 here, I'm less than a full thumbs. It's kind of accurate for Hoka, but again, I feel a touch of squeeze here. This is a model I could potentially go up to a US 10.5. I talked about this in an earlier video on sizing for trail super shoes. One great thing about the shoe is they have a massive ring of padding around the back of this shoe, and that really holds the heel in. So if you were thinking of going, perhaps, depending on your sizing, definitely a half size up, perhaps even a full size up, depending on how you size your shoes. Heel hold is less of a concern in this one, so perhaps you can get away with that. Again, I'm not even lace locking here with the carbon fiber plate in the mix. All of this foam underfoot. The rocker really rolls the foot, so that gives less of a pulling on the heel because it's kind of pushing along the heel with the rocker. Speed Ultra 2 here, on the other hand, they definitely improve the fit of the upper, a little bit less volume, same kind of narrowness up front. I think the taper at the front of the toe box is similar between these two shoes, maybe a touch of extra width around this area with the Speed Ultra. I'm very comfortable in the 10 here. I think I have a little bit more length than I have with the 10. I definitely have a little more length here in the Speed Ultra 2 compared to this one. But this is another model I don't know if I would run this 100 miles, say on a trail race. I'm not quite certain what type of terrain. I ran the previous version in 50 miler, so that feels good to me. Maybe 100K for me. But of course, many can run this shoe for a full 100 milers. And in that case, I might want to go a little bit more because, again, heel hold is also drastically improved in this one. I talked about that in my other video. Check that one out for all the details. Put a little kind of strap around here, but they also critically improved the bolstering all around the inside here. So I don't have any heel kind of slippage issues at all with this shoe either. You have a huge toe sweep, bigger in this model, in fact, than the Rocket X Trail. Rocket X Trail wants you to really land and use more of the full foot, more of the length of that rocker, whereas this one wants you like really forward leaning, not sitting back on the heel at all. You could almost kind of find yourself falling back if you lean this way. You kind of fall off back to the side in this shoe. Not a great hiking shoe, by the way. I actually put the left shoe in my backpack. I don't think I need to change it though. I was thinking this might feel weird for hiking for quite a long time, but it's okay enough. I'm not going or walking too slow. Another note here with these two models and perhaps other models which are a little tighter at the front of the toe box. I've got my Sidas T-Free trail socks on. Got a little refresher on my Sidas socks for the 2026 season. These are great, and I think going forward I'm going to use this sock in most of these races where I'm not wearing an Injinji sock or a Injinji / liner dual layer setup, which I have used for longer 100-mile races in the past. Anything kind of less than that, I don't think there's any downside to wearing a T-Free sock. I mentioned that 6-hour race. I wore some regular thinner socks because the shoe that I wore, that prototype, is also a little bit more of a racing model, a little bit more snugger at the front of the toe box, and like the Rocket X Trail and the Speed Ultra 2 and perhaps other carbon plated or otherwise plated super shoe models. Again, big toe rocker. As you get into the front of that toe rocker, really puts the pressure, puts the squeeze on the front of your toes as you get into your toe off. So in that 6-hour race, I didn't wear this sock, but I wore another one. And after 6 hours, or towards the end of that race, I started feeling some irritation on the second toe, the one next to my big toe on one of my feet. I ended up having kind of a large blister on the side of my second toe, the one next to the big toe. So a lot of times the squeezing of the toe box at the front there over time, you may not notice this in your short or training runs, but once you get to those longer durations out there, a lot of that squeezing will kind of give friction. That's one reason why toe socks are good. The issue being, can you always fit them in the shoe you want to wear? They take up more space. T-Free here, for that specific scenario, would have been ideal because it would have kept my big toe separated from the next one. Wouldn't have got that irritation. And compared to a toe sock, the T-Free model just takes up way less space. The other 4 toes are together, and then you have your toe free. I think there's probably some benefit to separating the big toe as far as having more power. Having it even separated in your sock may just help a little bit with proprioception, having it kind of feel like you're pushing off the big toe, or at least something to key in on, perhaps even in training. So highly recommend the Sidas T-Free here. I even ran, they have a road model, which is a little bit less padded, but same kind of setup with an isolated big toe. I ran that model in the Munich Marathon, and it was great. No problems at all. So I highly recommend those T-Free models from Sidas. I thought it would be a lot more awkward, again, just walking in the Speed Ultra 2, and it's okay, but it is a little more awkward. Not that these are hiking shoes, but if you had to choose one or the other to go for a hike, definitely go with the Hoka here. Feel more stable on the ground, just feel more normal. The Adidas, I feel kind of weird, honestly, because when I'm walking here, I'm obviously landing on the heel most of the time, and I feel like I'm, I don't know, getting held up. Even walking, it's kind of like noticeable how the heel is tilted back off to the lateral side in the Adidas shoe. So final thoughts for now on the Rocket X Trail. Where do I see that one as far as what can it really handle out on the trails? It's definitely leaning more towards lighter trails, moderate trails. You want to make sure you can kind of spot your landings in this shoe, similar to some aspects of the Kiprun shoes. Very energetic. This one has you're high off the ground, and the plate is energetic, so you get a lot of softness, also bounce, plus plate action. A lot of even super shoes will have kind of two of those aspects. They'll be very reactive, a lot of action from the plate, very bouncy, or they'll be kind of soft and use a plate to kind of lean into some lever action. Something about this Rocket X Trail setup here, the A-TPU foam and the plate, it's just, it does feel soft. It does feel like you're not fully sinking in a bottoming out kind of way, but in a highly cushioned way. Feels soft underfoot, but it does also feel like it rebounds, and then you do have the action from the plate. So you're hitting all three of those elements there. A lot of those higher stack ones, you're going to get one or the other. Like I said, you'll have the action from the plate, generally speaking. A lot of them will be leaning more into efficiency versus, say, that fast levering, but it'll either feel like soft or bouncy reactive. It's kind of like different with the Rocket X Trail in that it's both soft and bouncy reactive. It's a very interesting feel underfoot. So given those factors of softness, bounce, and plate action, on top of the upper setup here, with those three aspects, it's hard, to strap the foot down onto this. I think they're doing the best they can while also keeping the weight down. You could, of course, put a very thick or heavily reinforced upper, really look at strapping the foot down, but then you're going to get a much heavier shoe. I think they wanted to not lean as much into, say, extreme foothold or foothold that could handle pretty much everything. They're just kind of accepting of the fact that this is going to be a lighter, faster, moderate trail-oriented super shoe here, not your burly type of mountain model. And I think they've hit that factor here. The kind of road shaping of the shoe, plus all those webs of underlays throughout the inside of the upper. I mean, they're doing the best they can with what you've got going on underfoot. It works really well. Of course, as with any shoe, how far you can handle these is going to vary with your skill as a runner, plus the terrain. Hans Troyer, as we know, Black Canyon, crushing it out in these Rocket X trails. Saw a little turn there on my Speed Ultra 2s. You notice that I landed a little tweak there. But you do have the wide platform. So I think as long as you're relatively kind of stable or relatively able to spot stable foot landings, you will be okay in the Rocket X Trail. But highly technical running, rocky, sharp stuff. Again, there's a lot of exposed midsole foam underfoot. That's another aspect why you wouldn't want to take this in that crazy rocky terrain. A-TPU, I believe, is more durable than PBA as far as not getting kind of torn up with rocks and stuff like that, but it is still heavily exposed underfoot there, so I wouldn't bank on that if you're running on extended sharp rocks. So final answer to that commenter's question, I would go with the Rocket X Trail if you needed some amount of traction for that course that you're running. If it were not the case, have a couple of other options back at the van we're going to take a look at. Road super shoes are definitely in play for those types of, say, canal path type races. They will certainly save you a fair amount of weight. As far as general racing, anything in that lighter range of trails, again, where you need some traction, perhaps it's technical or moderate at times, but majority runnable, I would probably lean Rocket X Trail, but it depends on the ratio of technical terrain in the mix. I think back to that Scout Mountain 50 miler that I ran in the original Speed Ultra. I think if it was more technical running, I would certainly lean towards the Speed Ultra. If it was moderately technical running, I'd probably still lean Speed Ultra. Thinking back to that race at Scout Mountain 50 miler, I ran really fast, even though at times I felt pretty unstable. Coming off of Scout, there's a very steep descent. There's a lot of like heinous two-track roads on that course too. A lot of smooth single track as well. Beautiful race, by the way, out at Scout Mountain, 50 miler, 100 miler. Those are awesome. But I felt unstable at times in the Speed Ultra 1, especially on that steep descent, but I ended up still running fast. So sometimes you have to think about what's the ratio. The technical parts come to your mind, come to the forefront when looking back at a race and kind of what you covered after the fact. But if you really think about it rationally, a lot of times there's a lot more runnable terrain out there and in a lot of these courses. So I think with the version 2 here that I have, I would have felt even better than version 1. Of course, version 1 is a little bit lighter, but the heel padding and the foothold of this one, the sizing they adjusted here with the Adidas shoe, is definitely way better than version 1. So going back in time, running Scout Mountain 50 miler in the Speed Ultra 2, I definitely would have felt more comfortable in this shoe than that one. Kind of ping-ponging back and forth here with both of these models. Rocket X Trail preferred race picks. Again, if I were to go to Eagle Island and do that 12-hour out there flat race, I would love to have this shoe on my feet. Certainly, if you're going more moderate in terms of rockiness and technicality underfoot, moderate but perhaps not steep, maybe something like a Black Canyon where it's rough, but you don't have like huge mountain climbs and huge kind of mountain descents. There's no poles in the mix, obviously, out at Black Canyon. That kind of course, more of that rolling stuff, even though it's rough underfoot. Rocket X Trail would probably be a good pick for that. You have the narrowness with the Speed Ultra 2. I guess that's up to you as to how well you could manage that in technical terrain. You saw me have a little minor ankle tweak there. That was nothing. Could have just hit the wrong rock. That happens in any shoe, but something that to take more in consideration with the Adidas shoe. All right, so I got the clean version of both of these shoes that I wore. Quick check on the platforms again. See the major difference. Look at flexibility here. Got the energy rods in the Adidas shoe. Decent flex. Find that the width here, pretty adaptable with these kind of like wings under here. Does give good contouring under the ground. So if you are up on your forefoot, again, you feel like you're an agile, efficient runner, you can take these more so in technical terrain, even with the narrow platform. Again, if you're highly efficient and agile. If you're maybe running at slower paces and you feel like you're not quite as agile, this is going to be kind of tricky to handle, especially if it's steep and technical. Steep and technical is not the route I would also want to take the Rocket X Trail here, just because it's kind of hard to find places to land this shoe to kind of touch down on the ground. A little tricky with the width there. Quick check on the Flex H-shaped plate. It is quite a bit stiff, but touch of flexibility under there. One little note on the upper I will mention, there is this vamp here. I talked about all the internal webbing around this shoe to kind of strap the foot down as much as possible, keep it kind of on top of this white part. You can see how it flares out a lot, so your foot is riding on top of that. They want to use all the strapping to hold it down. They have the vamp here, or looks like a vamp here in most of Hoka's models, especially the trail models, probably even the road too. It's usually a stretchy material. Not in this case here. This material in this vamp is the same as this material, so there is no stretch to it. I have another shoe just in for test, Zenal 3. You can see the vamp here. This is more of like a neoprene type. This is even a little bit different compared to their other ones, but this is the stretchy type material that you see typical in Hoka's models. Got this in a US 9.5. Review will be coming soon. I can't wait to run in this shoe, by the way. No plate, super flexible, super critical foam underfoot, very tight squeeze in the toe box, but difference being, again, difference with the Rocket X Trail, these shoes are nowhere near each other, by the way. It feels like a slipper on the foot. It is super tight in the toe box, but with that vamp there, it gives that stretch. Coming back to the Rocket X Trail, you don't have any stretch in this model here. I don't think they want your foot kind of moving around at all. They want to keep it just where it is inside of the shoe with this one here. Race to Roby Creek just ran last week. Check out my video on that. I went around asking all types of runners what shoes they were running in. Got a few road super shoes, of course, especially at the front of the pack. Also, wide variety of different trail shoes. It's not a trail race. It does go up a dirt road. It's a half marathon, starting out on road, finishing out on road, but you have a big about 8-mile section where you go up and down 2,000 feet. So a lot of the faster runners end up running that in road super shoes. Something I talked about, if the terrain is easy for this commenter, cinder path, you might want to look at a road super shoe. Rocket X3 here. This is the shoe I wore in the Munich Marathon, and this is the shoe now 3-time winner Nate Souther wore out at Roby Creek last week. If I was running Roby Creek last week, I would have also worn this shoe because got a little, you can see the outsole there. It's not crazy smooth. This is why I kind of think is a good pick. There's a few little cutouts here, a little bit of texture to it. So as long as the dirt is dry and smooth, certainly for a canal path type of race, you can get away with a road super shoe like this and save, I'll check the weight on this one, but quite a bit of weight. It's definitely less underfoot, less width. You're going to feel quicker, perhaps not as stable if you're a trail runner used to running on wider platforms. It's going to be a little bit different in this one. You have to kind of make sure you're used to running in a road style super shoe. But front of the pack, running faster, you have road shoes in the mix. Perhaps you do some road racing, certainly an option there. Coming back to Roby Creek, so I ran it the previous 2 years, not this year. First year, wore the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. We saw a few of those out there. These are kind of pretty beat up and packed down at this point. ZoomX foam. This is super stiff. I like the Rocket X3 because it has the plate in there, but same level of stiffness, but it is softer underfoot, and the upper kind of has a nicer shape to it. This one has that kind of shape that kind of shoots off in this direction over here, which I always found a little bit weird and something I had to work with to get the performance that I wanted, which is in the shoe. Had to work with this kind of weird upper fit, this offset lacing, this kind of thing. I have these, pull these out of the box, don't run these too often. Last year, when I ran faster than the previous year in the Next Percent 2, I actually wore this shoe, and this is a Puma Deviate Nitro Elite Trail shoe here. You can see the lugs here. They're kind of smoothish though and broad though. This is another shoe you can get away with on smoother trails. I've seen plenty of runners, I think Andy Wacker wears this shoe all the time in pretty extreme technical terrain. So again, just comes down to your comfortability in this type of shoe, but this plate in this shoe plus this foam, I talked about the Rocket X Trail being kind of like soft and bouncy and the action. This one has the bounce and the action, but perhaps not the softness. So for a lot of runners out there, especially when you're going up in distance and duration, this is going to feel like super active for probably a shorter distance race. May vary if you're a highly efficient runner, lighter weight runner, perhaps you could take them longer, but I do think this leans towards shorter distance racing. Again, I ran faster in this shoe than the Next Percent 2. I was in better shape though last year compared to the previous year when I had first run Roby Creek. Also had a year of experience under my belt, so had a great race in that. Again, it is a trail shoe, but It's kind of like you don't have the same weight savings as you do with a road shoe like this. Even though this is super fast out on the trails for smoother, easier type of terrain, there's just like less to road shoes. There's less overlays. The upper is way thinner. The tongue is way thinner. A lot of elements in this shoe add up to, say, at least an ounce. I think it's even more difference between the weights in these two shoes. So with a road super shoe, the weight factor is going to be the big thing that you're going to want to go with. So that's all for now. Thank you for tuning in. Again, coming along with me for another little hike. 2 short weeks till I'm back out there on the trail. You might have noticed me doing a couple quick steps here and there, getting a little antsy, but again, check out my last video, why race. I'm gonna follow doctor's orders, stick with the plan, make sure I'm fully recovered so I can go, or at least ramp up into being full gas for the rest of the season. Hoka Rocket X Trail. We'll see what races I come up with. I may not be doing some of those longer distance ones this year, so I may not actually race in this one, but we'll see. You never know. I may choose to do some flatter stuff, depending on how the leg feels, depending on how quickly I can ramp up. May not want to go into the steeper stuff this season, or at least save it for later in the year. So maybe if I want to run a little faster, a little flatter, maybe a little bit moderate, might go with the Rocket X Trail, so you might see these out there. Thank you for tuning in once again. Check out the website, www.humblerunning.com. 2 weeks to go. You might see me hiking in 1 or 2 more videos. May do a couple more roundups on some other things, but then as soon as possible, I will see you back out on the trails.